Alrighty. Hey everybody, Steve here. We are back and we are rocking it. Yes, what we're ended up doing. In case you haven't noticed, I've got a new Ripper mask. So, with that being said, today's episode of RIK, Retired in Korea, just wanted to kind of show off this little thing that we got here. So we're doing a little bit of a Ripper thing. This is going to be the Ripper mask that I'm going to continue painting. Should finish it up in a couple of days, and we'll use this for Halloween. So yeah, that's what we end up having. George is in. George pops up and says hi. Ends up saying, yeah, howdy. Good looking mask. Yeah, it is turning out pretty good. This was the full face mask that I ended up printing out all in one shot. This is from Galactic Armory, and just finished the brown on there. And so we've got the majority of the colors on there. So now what we're going to end up doing is rocking all the little details. I might even do some damage on it. We'll see how that goes. So, yeah, the paint job's coming out pretty good, I have to admit. And I'm saving a lot of time by doing spray paint. So all of that is spray paint. We did primer, we did the tan, taped it off, did the black, and then last night I ended up doing the brown after taping off the parts. And so to try to get all of the big areas done in the quickest amount of time instead of doing a paintbrush, because that takes a lot of time. And spray paint cans make it so much easier. So yeah, we got that going on. As you know, George, and anybody else who's watching, I'm Steve, the retired hobby tech guy, American expat in Korea. Yes, the wife and I retired here in Korea. We sold everything in the United States. House, car, guns, ammo, prepping supplies, all of that stuff. Everything in the kitchen junk drawer. Absolutely everything. We left the house, we sold it, and we had a buddy of mine who bought our truck and dropped us off, and boom, we got on a plane, and next thing you know, we retired early, and now we're here in Korea. We've been here for 3 years. Matter of fact, we got here the 1st of October 3 years ago, so it's just over 3 years. And it's amazing on how time flies and how fast it's kind of gone, but at the same time it seems like we've been here for a long time, at least in my opinion. So anyway, through this series of RIK, and I call it RIK, Retired in Korea, because it kind of shortens and gives me some more characters to work with on titles. So yeah, this is the RIK series. We're going to talk about the super age. We're going to talk about foreign labor here in Korea. We're going to talk about Chinese tourists acting badly, and Korean people don't like it, and I don't like it either. Then we're going to talk about Cambodia and Korea and what's going on between those two countries, and there's a pretty simple solution for that. And then the drama with The Witcher. I normally don't talk about stuff like that, but this is going to be an interesting little thing, and it kind of opened my eyes because I had some preconceived perceptions about some things. And that's going to be kind of eye-opening. So I'm kind of disappointed is what it comes down to. We are rocking a vanilla bean latte. We've got a dark roast, and it went a little bit too quick. This I need to adjust the grind size so it's a little bit finer, so it doesn't flow as fast, so I can get more crema on there. But it's still a good cup. Yeah, still a good cup. Not great, but it's still a good cup. So with that, we're going to jump into right here, and we're going to talk about the stuff here in Korea. If we take a look at this, 70s and over people here in Korea, in other words, the seniors, and I'm 59. I am 59. Wow, 59 this month. And these people are in their 70s, and they outnumber people in their 20s for the first time amid a low birth rate and the aging population. Actually, I saw an article that was talking about how Korea has now become a super age population. And yeah, this was just kind of crazy. More people in their 70s than in their 20s. That is amazing. The number of people in their 20s fell below the number of people in their 70s and older for the first time last year since the country's largest age group. People in their 20s are now the smallest adult cohort. And yeah, it is, that's kind of interesting. According to the census, formerly Statistics Korea, on Sunday, the population of people in their 20s stood at 6.3 million last year, down 193,000, and the largest drop across all age groups, surpassing declines of those under 10, down 192, and people in their 40s, down 169. Yeah, it's going to be a super age society. We're kind of seeing the same thing with the United States as well, and yeah, it's kind of interesting. We're getting past the, I don't know, the boomers, the largest segment of society, and the younger generation are not pumping out kids. So yeah, that's a good cup. George says, I'm lazy and cheap, and I use Maxwell House and a reusable K-cup. George, you need to expand your horizons. I was doing the same thing, not with the K-cup, but I was a big Folgers fan and all that. And it wasn't until I started getting into espressos and finding out that even just drip, fresh beans and drip coffee, it makes a world of difference. It just blew my mind. And then I got into espressos. Yeah, highly encourage you to try some fresh beans. Well, they're not fresh beans, but freshly roasted beans. And then you wait about 2 weeks for them to air out and gas out. And then some wonderful, wonderful coffee. Go to a coffee shop that does stuff like that. And yeah, you'll put away the Maxwell House. I'm telling you, it is, yeah. Anyway, back to this. Like George says, no one is having kids anymore. Yeah, that is absolutely true. The number of people in their 20s peaked at 7.03 million in 2020. And a little bit of context is that Korea's population is about 50 million. So yeah, falling between 140 and 210 annually. As a result, the size of 20-something population fell behind that of 70 and over, 6.54 million. For the first time since 1925. The age group, people in their 50s, were the largest group of 8.7 million, followed by those in their 40s at 7.8, 60s at 7.79. Sharp contrast of just 3 decades ago when people in their 20s formed the largest population in Korea. So yeah, the presence of people in their 20s in the labor market is also shrinking. So you don't have as many kids, you don't have as many people going through school. You don't have as many people getting jobs. Imagine that. The figures declined. Unemployment rate for people in their 20s was 5% in August, up 1 percentage point from a year earlier, and the highest since 2022. So major shift. And this is even going out towards and having an effect on not only jobs but college education as well, because Korea is real big on education. I mean, you got to get into a good preschool so that you can get into a good elementary school, so you can get into a good middle school, junior high, high schools, get into a good college, so you can get into a good job at one of the 5 big chaebols or Samsung or whatever it is, and do the wife and the kids and the car and the apartments and all of that stuff. Unfortunately, with this shift in the demographic here in Korea, kind of like what we're seeing in the United States, now there's even affecting the education. I was reading an article the other day talking about how young people are dropping out of college, or not as many getting into college here in Korea. So again, we're seeing kind of an upset of the societal norms here in Korea, and that's going to be interesting. CB says, Merry Columbus Day. I didn't know it was Columbus Day, but alrighty. Good one. We'll have a Columbus Day. Or what is the more socially acceptable Indigenous People Day, or I'm not sure anymore, but it's quite an interesting little thing. But with the shrinking population and the employment changes here in Korea, what we're seeing is a change that's going to have effects in finance. It's going to have effects in housing because housing is high and young people aren't working as much or can get as many jobs. So there's a little bit of an unemployment thing going on here. And with the high prices of housing and the bad economy that we have in Korea, I think the exchange rate has popped up to 14.31 per dollar, which, to put that into perspective, back in 97 when the world IMF came and had to bail out Korea, the exchange rate was 1,500. Now there's obviously some other things that came into play with the bailout back then, and it wasn't just because of the exchange rate, but that was one of the factors that they looked at. So while it's bad for Koreans, it's good for us because I get paid in dollars and we exchange it and our money goes a little bit farther. But yeah, this is it's interesting how we have 70s and over outnumber people in their 20s for the first time. And there's a lot of stuff going on here in Korea for the government and what they're trying to do. And they're getting a little bit they're offering like money, like tax rebates if you have a child or whatsoever. You end up, they'll help pay for diapers or schooling or things like that. And a matter of fact, the wife has a friend of hers that has like 2 or 3 kids or whatever, I think 3 kids. And what they try to do is if you have kids, then you can get free tuition for college. So on that side of the coin, they're really trying to entice young people to have more children because Korea has become such a super age society. And with that, there also comes a lot of other things as well, with a decline in the workforce. And combine that with a bad economy, it's like, well, nobody wants to be farmers anymore. And there's kind of this dynamic of after the Korean War, there's farmers and so on and so forth. Agriculture was really big. And then because that was where they were at the time. And then as Korea rebuilt from the ground up in a record amount of time and became a booming economy, they've kind of left behind the agricultural stuff. And so families that at one time when you had kids, their thing was, I'm going to stay and work the family farm. And some of them did for a long time. But now in recent times, a lot of people and kids in Korea don't want to be farmers. It's just not an appealing thing, and a lot of parents, they've been pushing their kids to get an education so that they don't have to be farmers and work as hard as their parents did or their grandparents or so on. So I kind of get that. But with this super age society that we're in, we're losing here in Korea a workforce. And so now they're going to have to turn, as other countries experience the same thing like Japan, they're going to have to rely on foreign workers. And so this is an interesting dichotomy that we end up having here in Korea. For one, people like Westerners that are trying to get jobs in Korea, kind of like American citizens or whatever, it ends up, it's real hard to find jobs because of the bad economy and companies are pulling back and staying with local people because it's cheaper. They don't have to teach the language and so on and so forth. And they're trying to trim the fat. And so if you can hire somebody from your own country in Korea, why would you hire somebody, from the United States? So there's that kind of pullback there. But then there's a huge influx of foreigners because of the foreign labor that is needed for like agricultural and manufacturing jobs. George ends up saying, I'm not sure why people are just so against having kids. It seems to be happening all over the world. That's absolutely true. I think you're right. A lot of people are like, I just don't see having kids. And maybe part of that has to do with, the dream of getting married, having a good job, getting married, having kids, and you've attained the American dream or the Korean dream. You got an apartment in Seoul or whatever it is, keeping up with the Kims. In the United States, is keeping up with the Joneses. There was that mentality of having, the house, the car, the dog, and the 2.5 kids, and boom, you work 30, 40 years and you retire and you've attained the dream. That kind of spilled over into a lot of other countries. And now that dream is fading because of economy, because kids are like, hey, yeah, I don't want to be tied down for the next 18 years, by having kids. So, yeah, it's just one of those things where it's like, there we go. It's just one of those things where it's like some societal norms are changing, but you have to go to manual labor. There's still agricultural jobs, manufacturing, so on and so forth, textiles. All of that is coming into play. CB says robots with AI taking over, George. Yes, eventually they will. Eventually they will. I mean, look at Elon Musk and a number of other companies that are producing robots that eventually are going to, yeah, they're going to do a lot of stuff. I mean, could you imagine if the idea of buying a robot, and even just on a personal level, that can do your laundry, cook meals, clean your house. If there was a robot that did all that and do your dishes and let's see what else, do all of that stuff, make your bed, do the laundry, all of that. I mean, I would pay 30 grand for that, 40 grand for that, and boom. So there, and then, already in Korea, we have robots that deliver food to tables. So instead of having, 5 or 6 or 10 different waitresses in a restaurant, you have like a minimal amount of waiters or waitresses, and then you have robots that just come and deliver the food. They have that here in Korea, and it's kind of a normal thing in many places. And it's like, wow, that's where we're going to end up going, slowly but surely. I think we're going to get more robots, and yeah, the robot rolls up. It's not like a walking humanoid robot, but it's a robot on wheels, and some of them have faces and stuff, and kind of the robot-like smile or whatever. Here's your food, and have a good meal. And of course, it's all in Korean, but that allows the business to not have to hire 5 or 6 different waitresses to bring food or whatever. You could just have waitresses that come and take your order, and then the robot delivers them. Now it's even getting to the place of where to order, you have like a kiosk screen at your table. So you go through the menu, you pick all the stuff that you want, you swipe your card, you pay for it, and then the robot comes and delivers it, and boom, there you are. You don't have any human interaction with anybody. And there's actually stores that are not manned. They're unmanned stores, and through cameras, and of course you swipe your card to get into the store, but there's no one manning the store. It's just you pick the stuff you want and you scan it and you pay, and if you skip out, they know who you are because you had to scan your card to get in. And so, yeah, that's kind of frowned upon here in Korea. There's no way you could do that in the United States. California, New York, Denver, there's no way you would be able to do stuff like that. That would be insane. Or Seattle, it just, yeah, those things would not fly. You couldn't do that. Let's see, Adam, hey, welcome, Adam. Not only that, many women are so work career focused and just don't want relationships, keep pushing men away. It's difficult to find relationships. And that's true. In regards to the relationship of having a monogamous marriage, that type of relationship, many people are like, why do that? And especially with divorce rates that are so high, and people don't want to be nailed down in a relationship if things go awry, and then you have divorce and so on and so forth. So from kind of that perspective, talking with some young people, they don't want to have to go through that pain and suffering, so why get married? Just date and have your relationships and have fun. CB says, can we buy robot kids yet? I don't know. Will it go through puberty and tell you to F off when you tell it to clean its room or clean your room or whatever? I don't think I'd want a child robot to go. Yeah, that's. George pops up and says, it's like people were intentionally disincentivizing and forgot the great joy that comes with kids. Sure, there's hardship. However, it is worth it. Is worth it, and it's a shame I could never have any myself. Yeah, there is something to be said for having kids. We've got one kid, and that's all we could end up having. But we kind of tell everybody ours became a doctor, so we had a good one from the get-go, and so that's why we didn't have any more. But there is something to be said for raising a child and seeing that child, raising the child properly. Let's just set that straight. Raising the child properly with good morals, good work ethic, and so on and so forth, and really to see that little thing develop into a human being, and of course the love and affection and the ups and the downs and all that stuff, and so that they become a responsible adult. There's no robot is ever going to be able to replace that. There is a lot of joy of having kids, but with the people that we have nowadays, it's more the immediate gratification instead of the long game. And a lot of people are just like, eh. And like you said, CB said, there's a lot of people that, Adam said in his comment, many women want careers, and that keeps them from having a traditional marriage relationship. And so, people coming into their own and changing that dynamic has changed the playing field, and you don't have more kids. So then you're going to have, and the United States is seeing that as well, and other westernized countries. The problem is after World War II, a bunch of people came back from the war and were like, hey, we're going to, I was fighting for my country, I was fighting for this, and I'm going to work hard and get a good job, I'm going to get the wife, the kid, the dog and the house, and, work 40 years and retire. That was the huge, and then they had a bunch of kids. So that was the largest demographic. And then the generations after that demographic started going down and down and down. And this is being experienced by all countries, with the exception of some other countries of where they breed like rabbits. That's all I'm going to say. And with that can be good. That can also be bad. It depends on the morals and the ethics and the things and how you raise your children. So we won't get into anything else than that. But yeah, it's very, very interesting. But getting back to kind of like the jobs in Korea, how I said that foreigners are having a hard time finding jobs in Korea, and I'll get a number of people that will contact me. And they say, hey, I can't retire like you did with you and your Korean spouse. My wife has Korean ancestry, so we can't get the F1, F4 visa. But do you know of any places that are hiring in Korea for foreigners, U.S. citizens? And unfortunately, those jobs are really, really thin. And it used to be easy to get a job, but now it's really hard because of the bad economy and so on and so forth. So we get back to the place of where it's just, it's hard to get jobs here. And going back to the relationship thing, that kind of affects relationships as well. And also combine the fact that people want their careers. Maybe you have a bad economy and people feel that they just don't have enough money to raise a kid because it would be a disservice. So we're kind of seeing that. Adam pops up and says many relationships had become casual, lack intimacy, not worth effort anymore. Yeah, I mean, when you go out on a date and you swipe your Tinder and smash and go on to the next one or whatever it is, you get that immediate gratification and you don't have a lasting relationship. And a lot of young people these days are like, well, why would I want to have a relationship with somebody who's not experienced? And it's like, well, you can grow together and have fun together, at least in that aspect. But these days, the younger kids are like, no, it doesn't matter, what your body count is and so on and so forth. The higher the body count, who would want to get, and eventually these, a lot of these women want to, and men too, will figure out and say, hey, well, I want to settle down. with a good man or a good woman, and then the problem is that the good men and good women don't want a high body count. So it's like, what do we do with that? That's a whole nother video right there. George ends up saying there has to be a balance that can be struck. Yeah, there's got to be a balance. Verithus, good morning. Good morning, sir. How you doing? Talking about Korea and relationships and the changing demographic on, how the American dream of, the house, the car, the kids, and the dog, and that American dream is kind of subsided with the change in our population, and that the younger population isn't populating like the older population did after World War II. And so we're getting into an age society, which here in Korea is a super age society, kind of like Japan, and how that has an effect. And we've been talking about how relationship status and norms have changed. And then in regards to Korea, on how, with the super age society, another thing is you got to have somebody that's going to work. And younger Koreans don't want to work on farms. They don't want to work in factories and so on and so forth. So Korea has really come up, and even though the economy is bad, they're pushing for a lot of foreign labor to do those jobs. So yeah, we're going to segue into that. I thought that was pretty good. Foreign population surpasses 2 million in Korea as it faces test of social inclusion. And this is kind of an interesting thing that we're talking about here. Foreign farmers and workers harvest potatoes in Songjeon, Gangneung, Gangwon. Laborers have become essential in sectors avoided by local workers, including construction, agricultural, fisheries, manufacturing, factories, so on and so forth. The number of foreigners residing in Korea for more than 3 months exceeded 2 million for the first time last year. Should be noted, again, Korea only has 50 million people, 51 million people. According to the data, reached 2.04 million, accounting for 3.9% of the total population. It was driven by the expansion of foreign worker permit system and efforts by local governments to attract international students. Several municipalities have foreign populations exceeding 10% of their residents, reflecting a growing dependence on migrant workers in construction and all those different areas. The country's maturity has an inclusive society that has been called in question after a shocking video emerged from a brick factory in Naju, South Jola, showed a Sri Lankan worker bound to a pile of bricks with some shrink wrap, lifted by a forklift while colleagues mocked him. President Lee Jae-myung condemned as unacceptable human rights violation, and they launched an investigation. And the victim, who entered Korea under an E9 visa valid for 3 years, said he faced verbal abuse and described the incident as humiliating. Actually, we took a look at that video, and it's, on one side of me, it's like, you got to be able to take a good ribbing, but then on the other side, you also have to understand that it's like, if this is, there's something to be said for having fun on the work site. But then there's that line or that boundary that goes into hazing, whereas you look at somebody as less as of a human being and you do things like that, then that's very problematic, in my opinion. It's just not a good thing. Foreign workers face structural barriers for speaking out. Under current rules, if they fail to secure government approval to change employers within 90 days after leaving a workplace, they risk deportation. So basically, once you get a job, it's hard to just say, hey, I'm going to quit, I'm going to go find another job, because there is that thing of how many jobs are there, how easy or how hard is it for a foreigner to find job in Korea, in a different place or whatever. How does he do that? He or she do that? Language barrier, there's always that comes into play as well. I mean, great as cell phones are in translation, that is a huge hurdle that many of these, so they seem like they're stuck into this. And on the other side of the coin, they end up that they're making money, and so they put up with the abuse because they send the money back home because they're making good money here in Korea compared to the countries that they come from. So we're talking about Sri Lanka, we're talking about Thailand, Cambodia, Kazakhstan, a number of other stands in Europe. a few other, let's see, Cambodia, Vietnam, Laos. There's a number of other countries, but generally countries that are like third world countries, or countries that are less economically well off than Korea. Let's just put it that way. So yeah, it ends up they're vulnerable to workplace abuse, and that's not something that's good. Improving public perceptions of foreign workers is also urgent. Let's get back to the screen here. They sustain industries that many Koreans avoid and fill gaps in the domestic labor market. While culture and language differences may slow their adjustment to the Bali or hurry-up pace of Korean workplaces, the differences should not be grounds for ridicule or contempt. So it's a very interesting kind of thing that we got going on, is that even though the economy is going poorly here in Korea, as evidenced by the shrinking won rate and things like that, they're still pushing for a lot of manual labor and manufacturing jobs here in Korea. So those jobs, if you want to do those, you can find those. But the amount of work that you're going to do, it's going to be some hard manual labor. I've talked to people from Sri Lanka, being locally here and working in some factory or whatever, and they work 6 days a week, and it's like 10, 12 hours a day. So in meager living accommodations. But again, they're thankful for the job because they're making good money compared to the jobs that they would be able to get in their home countries. So, yeah. George pops up and says, in the U.S. there are jobs. The problem is their willingness to get your hands dirty. I was never too good for any job. Let me get that back up there. I was never too good for any job, but one must be willing to work both smart and hard. Yeah, and there's definitely something to be said for that. A lot of the younger generation, I know in the United States, and you see videos on it of younger people that are just balking at the fact that they have to work an 8-hour day. Oh my gosh, I had to work an 8-hour day. I only got 10 minutes or 15 minutes or a half hour for lunch. Oh my gosh, the world is ending. I had to get off my phone and do work. That just seems so odd. You want all of these things in life. You want the phone, the computers, the TVs. You want to go on vacations and stuff like that, but you don't want to do the work. Well, how are you going to fund this stuff? And then they just put it on credit cards, which is weird because then they go into debt, and it's not a good cycle to get into. And so we have a lot of financially irresponsible young people. I'm not going to say all of them, but a big segment just don't know how to budget. They don't. They're really clueless. And then there's something to be said for the rise in housing prices. But really, the majority of jobs, you can get good jobs, but kind of like what George is saying, you have to work hard. You have to learn. You can do trades jobs that will pay you excellent money. I mean, I was an electronics technician for the state of Colorado, and it ends up, I found out that you could drive heavy equipment and make more than being an electronics technician for the state. You had inmates that had been in prison, got construction trades training in driving heavy equipment, and they're making more money than I was. Electricians are making, $50, $60 an hour. And, I think mine came out to like $25 an hour is what I was making at the time. And that doesn't require a college degree. There's a lot of jobs out there, but there's some demanding jobs. But again, there's going to be that trade-off. I wish we could all just be inherently wealthy, that nobody would have to work, that we'd be in this perfect utopia, but unfortunately, you're going to have to work. At least that's been my experience. So, yeah, it is, you got to get your hands dirty, And the thing is, a lot of the jobs today, you're not going to get your hands as dirty as previous generations. So, and then But then on the other side of the coin, we're talking about robots and AI and things like that, and how I was mentioning the robots that bring your food in restaurants, and you have kiosks, you have entire stores that are not manned by anybody. It's all AI, and scan it yourself and so on and so forth. So we're losing some jobs, but with that, on the other side of the coin, they're making it easier to get paid to do stuff that it was unheard of. Who thought being an influencer would be able to get you money and be a job? Now you have AI, you have people, especially a lot of younger people, are jumping onto AI and they're building businesses and starting businesses. And it's just amazing on how fast you go from zero to hero and using the tools that we have available today. But then there still seems to be a subset of people that are like, oh, I can't find a job, I can't do this. And it's like, well, then, sometimes you have to do some uncomfortable things to get a good job and to get paid. Sometimes you have to move. Sometimes you have to work things that you don't like to do for a lot of years. God bless if you can find a job that, that you love, and so it's not really a job from the get-go. But for the most part, that's not the norm. Great if you do. But yeah, getting back to here in Korea, it's interesting because you work hard and you want to go on vacation and you do all that stuff. It's going to require getting your hands dirty. George pops up and says we need to restore a work ethic in our society, and that would help tremendously. Yeah, I mean, there's working hard and working smart, and I think we need to have a balance of that. You have to be willing to work hard, and you're not going to know everything when you first start, but if you have that ability to want to work and to get your hands dirty, that will pay off in the end. But speaking about working hard and going on vacation, this next little bit that we're going to talk about here is quite interesting. Chinese tourists face backlash for allowing child to defecate in public at Jeju National Monument. Some people's kids. It's just like absolutely crazy. So a Chinese tourist allows her young child to relieve themselves at Jeju's Yangmyeong-haeun, a coast that's been designated as a national monument. And you just kind of drop trow and there you go. A Chinese tourist was caught allowing her child to relieve themselves. The post was uploaded, and it's a national monument contaminating the site in progress. It occurred the previous day during the Chuseok holiday, which is Thanksgiving, and they were visiting the coastal site when they witnessed this. It was very crowded, long line of people waiting. Then I saw a woman seating her child on the ground to defecate. Because there were so many people watching, she moved slightly farther down and finished there. The woman threw used wet wipes into the sea and left the child's waste on the ground. Really? That's it? Seriously? Having a kid, and I can understand, because we've been on vacation and you're traveling and so on and so forth, and the kids sometimes will be like, I got to go to the bathroom now. And it's like, well, can you wait a few minutes? We got to go a few more miles until we get to, no, Daddy, I need to go now. And things happen. Things happen. So I get that part. But if you get to the place of where it's like, I'm just gonna let my kid crap right there. If it's an emergency, I understand that. But if you don't clean up afterwards and you just throw the wipes into the ocean and pollute and leave the pile there, that I don't get. That is irresponsible. It says it was unbelievable. A person who seemed to be the group's tour guide was nearby, said nothing, and no one stopped her, even though many people saw it. When asked, the guide reportedly said the group was composed of Chinese tourists. I try not to hold prejudice against Chinese travelers, the post said, but it makes this difficult. A photo attached showed a woman crouching and holding a small child, and there was another one on a busy street. Just, hey, let your kid just crap on the street, instead of trying to find a toilet in a local store, restaurant, cafe. There's, most major cities have restroom facilities that are easy to spot. But there seems to be a lot of problems with this, and similar incidents have been reported in Jeju in the past. Um, yeah, and according to Jeju-do is the island that is on the southern tip of the peninsula of Korea, as part of Korea. Said from January to May this year, 3,522 out of 4,136 cases of public disorder involved foreign nationals, over 85% of the total. Compared to the same period last year, overall violations rose 817%, while numbers involving foreigners increased by 23-fold from 148 to 3522. Holy crow. That is crazy. That is crazy. George says, "Are you sure they weren't from L.A.?" No, they were from China. And there was another one that there's an incident. There's been this big push in Korea for the Chinese to come and visit Korea. There's huge push. China, come to Korea. I think they changed some of the immigration tourist visa, making it easier for Chinese to come to Korea and visit. And with that, they've had more incidents of Chinese acting the fool here in Korea. There was an article that I read, about 4 or 5 days ago, and I lost it. I can't find it again. But basically, this group of Chinese, it was like 3 guys, 2 girls, or something like that, whatever it was, came into a restaurant, and they started smoking, and it's like, hey, you can't smoke in here. Well, the Chinese people got pissed off, and they put their cigarettes out on the table, not in an ashtray or on a dish. They put them out on the table, of course, damaging the table, or they put them on the ground, or they just held their cigarette underneath the table and continued smoking. When they were pressed again, saying, hey, you need to go outside, there's no smoking in here, the Chinese people got belligerent. They started yelling at the staff and so on and so forth. They kind of trashed the restaurant a little bit. They were drunk. And really just put a bad light on, Koreans are seeing this, and this goes online. And of course, Koreans are like, what's the deal? You invite the Chinese over here, which is fine, but if you act a fool, now the Korean and the Chinese aren't seeing eye to eye, because you go to another country, you are representing, so you should be on your best behavior. That's all I'm saying. It's just it's just very, very, we just got back from Vietnam. But any time that we have traveled, and I've been in South America, been to Japan, Thailand, Korea, Vietnam, Taiwan, Mexico, a couple other places. But I have always been on my best behavior because I realize that I want to represent my country and to be a good representative. Unfortunately, we don't have that these days. There's a lot of people that just don't care. And the interesting thing, this is from the Korean side, is a lot of Koreans have noticed that when they travel to China, especially mainland China, people are really rude. There's a lot of travelers, you got to take it with a grain of salt. But there's a lot of rudeness that comes when Koreans go to China and visit different places and so on and so forth, as compared to other nationalities. But I've even seen some posts and some blogs of people, Americans, Westerners who came to China or went to China and visited, and they noticed that the rudeness level there was a little high. And then they were like, this isn't really good. And it's not like they went to a place that didn't have tourism. It was a tourism spot. I don't know, maybe it's tourism fatigue and they just get tired of it, of doing the same old job. I don't know what it is, but, regardless, if you're traveling, please be a good representative. And I understand if your kid's got to go, it's got to go. But you got to drop trowel, and it's like, I get that. I totally get that. I was a parent. But clean up after yourself. And then if there's no smoking in a restaurant, which signs, according to the article, there were signs in the restaurant saying no smoking. Just do what they say. Don't be a jerk and think, I'm all that in a bag of chips because I'm on vacation, which some people do. We've seen that as well. Foreigners and Westerners alike have that same mentality. we need to take some consideration of the countries that we're going to. So it might take a few minutes to look and see what their customs are, what's acceptable, what's not. I don't know. Maybe that's the thing. It's just really disheartening when you end up seeing people, acting a fool on vacation. You see enough of that on YouTube and TikTok and so on and so forth. And it's just like, I don't understand why people do that. So there's that. Let's get back to the other article. Seoul struggles to respond to rise in Cambodia abductions. This is interesting because, we thought about dipping over to Cambodia, but we didn't. I was tired. My back was messed up a little bit. So I was like, no, I just want to go back home. Lee vows diplomatic action as Korean police seek to set up a help desk in Cambodia after the death of a 20-year-old South Korean student raises travel safety concerns. And online scammers are very huge in Cambodia. It's kind of a huge thing. George ends up saying, Nashville gets a lot of tourists from all over the world. By far, the most polite I've met were people from Japan. Yeah. I mean, I agree with that. I mean, I've never seen any Japanese, even when I went to Japan, I never saw any Japanese acting the fool, or when they were in the United States or here in Korea or things like that. I just haven't seen that, because I think they respect and have this attitude. They don't have much an individualistic attitude, but it's more of a collective attitude of I don't want to make my country look bad. They have some pride in their country and their behavior. So yeah, it's but then again, Chinese, not so much. Anyway, it ends up apparently Cambodia, amid a surge of reported abductions and forced labor, the death of a 22-year-old Korean student who was tortured after being lured there by a fake job. Seoul and Phnom Penh police are set for high-level talks to discuss the rising crimes against Korea as part of border effort to strengthen cross-border law enforcement cooperation. Apparently, as you go through this, there's been a lot of things where, there's job offers. Come here to Cambodia, a country whose economy is way worse than that of Korea, but we're going to offer you a job that pays so much money. It's too good to be true. And it's too good to be true. And I don't understand how people fall for that. It's kind of like getting those scam emails where it says, oh, you won this, or you're the long lost, relative of somebody, and you have an inheritance, and it's always in your spam, or it's just all of that stuff is just like, oh, really? Oh, wow, yeah, Cambodia, because they're known for having high-paying jobs. Seriously, really? But yeah, it ends up, they even put out a travel advisory for Cambodia for here in Korea, and saying, hey, to postpone your travel or cancel your travel plans. And the foreign ministry here in Seoul urged South Koreans not to be duped by fake job advertisements from Cambodia that promise unrealistically high-paying jobs, as victims have fallen prey to abduction, they're held for ransom, or forced to take part in scams or labor. Usually what it ends up being is that you go over there for some job, and then the scam is to hold you for ransom until your family pays, a bunch of money, and then eventually, usually they let you go. But yeah, the latest incident, 2 South Koreans were discovered in, what is that? Sihanoukville in southwestern Cambodia were rescued by local police early October. The victims reported being threatened, beaten, and forced to take part in the scamming operation. They were rescued. Parker also said his office had played a role in rescuing 14 Korean nationals from Cambodia near Kampot in August, where a body discovered during the rescue operation was later identified as a Korean student. So, yeah, that's just crazy. Held for ransom, cause of death was cardiac arrest following torture. I'm going to have to cross Cambodia off the list, folks. I thought about going there. It was like, hey, there's a quick fix to that. Is don't go. Cut off all tourism ties with Cambodia and say, hey, you guys can't come here because you can't protect our citizens. So there's got to be a knee-jerk reaction. There's a cause and effect thing that comes into play. So yeah, don't go to Cambodia. Doesn't go well. I mean, in Vietnam there was some incidents of that as well, but it was kind of like not in the touristy areas of Vietnam, like the places we went to. But then I didn't see any problems when, we didn't see any problems when we were in Hanoi or Sapa, and those are big places. We stayed around the touristy areas as well, so that has something to be said for that. If you go into the seedy areas of any country, you could probably find some trouble and, FAFO. But yeah, maybe it also has to do with me being 6'2", 255 pounds or something. I'm probably not a real good target because there were some little people over there. There were some little people, and wherever I went. I got to show you a picture. Let me see if I can find the picture of me in a coffee shop. And I'm just saying, they're kind of small over there. Yeah, that's me in a coffee shop in Vietnam. And some of these coffee shops, there's coffee shops that have bigger tables and chairs, but a lot of them are small. So when I walked into a coffee shop or a restaurant, it's kind of interesting because people would stop and just, because I'm kind of a big guy. But my wife thought this picture would be funny, in that here I am, this little tiny table, and the drink is, yeah, I just thought that was kind of funny. Yeah. So it's, yeah. And there's some smaller people. Like here it is. Let's see if we can pop this in there. Oh, that's not going to play. That's just a picture. But anyway, yeah, I think, do I got another picture where it shows some disparity in the size of furniture like I just showed? I got so many pictures. I don't want to get bogged down and do stuff like that. Let's do a quick. No, I have to look for it anyway. But yeah, it's maybe that has something to do with people looking at me and probably thinking, yeah, probably not a good guy to pickpocket. I'm just saying. So yeah, it's very, very interesting. The other thing we're going to talk about is The Witcher. Now, I don't know if you all are into TV shows or movies or things like that. I'm kind of action. I'm kind of drama. I like a good suspense, drama. There's some horror that I like. Not all the horror is good. I like kind of like the, I don't know. There's some good horror movies. The Alien series, stuff like that, sci-fi space stuff. That's kind of like what I like. And The Witcher kind of goes into that. That was played by Henry Cavill, the guy who did Superman, which I think was probably one of the better Supermans that we've ever seen. And I remember Steve Reeves, I think, or the guy who ended up getting his back broke or whatever, the old Superman, and the horse bucked him, and the horse name was Kryptonite, and he ended up severing his spine or whatever, and he was kind of like quadriplegic or whatever. I forget his name. But Henry Cavill, the Superman guy, ended up doing a TV series on Netflix called The Witcher, which is a series of books that was set in kind of like a Dungeons and Dragons type of thing. And he amplified the main character as just, he just nailed it. And it's kind of like when you think of Superman, you think of Henry Cavill. The same thing with The Witcher is you think the main character, Geralt, or whatever the main character's name was, he is the epitome of Geralt. De Rivia was the main character, and he is The Witcher. He is that character. And then there were some problems with I don't know, direction of the show and so on and so forth. And Henry Cavill would end up, the story is that Henry Cavill would stop and say, no, you can't do this because in the book that we're referencing on page X, this paragraph here, this is what goes on in the scene. So he's well read in regards to the Witcher series. And apparently there was some creative differences between Henry Cavill and the writing staff and so on and so forth. And then there was kind of this little, it changed. They wanted to change the direction. And at that time, Netflix had kind of gone through, was kind of pushing the whole diversity thing, and kind of like the diversity that, who was it, Mars Michelson? He was doing a show, and where is he from, Norway or one of those Nordic countries? And back in the day, it was kind of a historical time period piece. And then it's funny how it's like everybody's focused on diversity, and this one reporter, I know I'm going down a rabbit trail. We'll get back to The Witcher. But it was so funny because they asked Mads Mikkelsen and said, hey, how come there's no, other minorities that are in this movie that you did? And apparently it was a really, really good movie. I like him as an actor. And it's like, is this push for forced diversity was like, it's like because there were no minorities here during that time? That was his answer in a nutshell. And it's just like, and I think Netflix ended up they're trying to push all of this stuff in certain instances, and it ended up that it took away from the story. And when you went away from the books and how the books put out the stories, and they wandered away from that, and then they tried to fill it with this other stuff and whatever, and the fans weren't happy. And then it ends up that Henry took off. I'd like to be a fly on the wall on how that came about, but he ended up as the main character. He says, "Yeah, I'm gone." So Netflix ended up getting Liam Hemsworth, which is the guy who played Thor's brother. The guy who played Thor, his brother Liam, ends up trying to step in and fill the shoes of Henry Cavill. And the funny thing with this is that it was like, looking at the situation, I like the Witcher series, I really do. And, it's just a huge, huge series. So you have this creative differences, and you have some other things that were being brought into the mix, and then they contact Liam and say, hey, can you come in and do this? And he's like, yeah. And he's walking into, it's between a rock and a hard place, and it's not his fault. And a lot of people didn't like him, and it was like, I was going to give him the benefit of the doubt. Key word was, until I saw this, because he had nothing to do with the writing of the show. He had nothing to do. He's stepping into some very big shoes, and Henry Cavill's bigger than Liam, and so yeah, it's literally and figuratively. But Liam, I thought he would do his best, and I was still going to watch the show, and I probably still will. But after this, my opinion of Liam has gone down. And this has pissed off a lot of people when it comes to the show The Witcher. So I wanted to throw this in and see what you all think. We're not here to honor your stupid pride. Liam Hemsworth pushed The Witcher 4 Season 4 to the edge of destruction after insulting Henry Cavill, and within hours, Netflix faced a $20 million nightmare following Cavill's explosive response. Wow. I mean, this just doesn't make sense to me. It's like, okay, you're Liam, and you're stepping into these shoes, and there's a lot of controversy involved. Instead of trying to say, hey, we're going to try to, I'm going to try to do my best to be the best character that I could be for The Witcher and so on and so forth, kind of trying to smooth things out, say, hey, I'm not Henry Cavill. I totally get that. But it's the story that's important. That's what I would say. But he ends up saying this stuff here, and this was insane. The entertainment world has witnessed countless disputes, but few have generated both noise and recent confrontation between Liam and Henry for the fourth season of The Witcher. Seemed like a simple process of transition of actors has become an international drama that threatens collapse of one of Netflix's most successful projects in recent years. I don't get it. I don't understand why media companies, Netflix or big production companies, they have a golden goose and it's laying golden eggs. And if you just let it go, let it do what you've been doing and don't touch it, don't alter it, don't try to flood it with this agenda, that agenda, or whatever. Just stay true to the books. And this isn't like a movie. This isn't like you've had to come up with a storyline. This is an existing series in books that is already there. So basically, the material is already written. You just need to, boom, consolidate it, make it, and have it fit into a TV series that could go on for years and years. But Netflix doesn't do that. They cut off the cash cow, and kind of like with the Superman series, I could never understand why they didn't call Henry Cavill back to do a follow-up of being Superman. It's like, oh, no, we're not going to do that. And it was like at the height. I really just don't get it. And then the last Superman that they just had was just, I know it was like a different version of Superman, kind of a different type of thing, but it just bombed, and it just, I don't understand. I mean, Henry Cavill's only going to get older. Use him as much as possible and make good movies and make everybody happy. But unfortunately, Netflix went the opposite way. Highly successful series, and we're pushing an agenda and whatever else, a change in creative direction, which is, you knew that was going to be problematic. Well, obviously they didn't know, and this is what ends up happening. Absolutely crazy. Yeah, it all started during a promotional press conference in which Hemsworth visibly tired of the constant comparison with Cavill, let out a phrase that resonated strongly on social. We're not here to honor his stupid pride. Ooh, somebody's butthurt. The statement perceived as a direct attack on the figure of Henry Cavill and its legacy as Geralt de Rivia immediately ignited outrage of the fanatic community, many of which have been expressing their discontent for a change of the actor for months. Really? Honor his stupid pride. That is like, why would you say that? I don't know. Maybe he's just young and stupid. Veritha says Henry Cavill was too good of a Superman. That's what makes finding a new one so hard. I totally agree. I mean, he will go down in history as being one of the best Supermen. And I've seen them all. I remember watching TV shows, black and white TV shows with the old Superman, the old Superman. So I've seen the series of Superman over time. And it's just, yeah, he was too good. But for Liam to come up and say this, we're not here to honor his stupid pride. What pride are we talking about? I don't get it. The Witcher, yeah. The reaction was immediate and brutal. In a matter of minutes, social networks were filled with criticisms of Hemsworth, accusing him of arrogance and not respecting the history or the followers who have sustained the franchise for so long. Hashtags like Henry is Geralt, boycott The Witcher began to become a worldwide trend, while thousands of users published images, scenes, and iconic phrases of Cavill as Geralt to highlight how irreplaceable they consider their presence. The effect was so devastating that, according to Eternal Leaks, Netflix came to register an immediate financial risk of more than $20 million in canceled subscribers or threatening to cancel in just 5 hours. 5 hours after Liam made that statement. A blow that no streaming giant can afford in an increasing competitive market. Why would you do that? It reminds me of that Rachel Zegler and how she her diarrhea of the mouth just killed her Disney thing with Snow White, that she wasn't white and there was no snow, and they just went so far from the story, the original storyline. It was so unrecognizable and it just bombed. And then she just kept yapping her mouth, and it ended up she now you don't hear from her because they thought she was going to be the next it girl in Hollywood, and it ends up she's just blew it, and that crashed and burned. So anyway, we continue on. In front of the storm, Henry Cavill decided not to remain silent. Okay, this is where it gets interesting. True to his elegant but forceful style, he published an official statement. Far from turning off the fire, ended up intensifying it. So this is like, oh, what did he say? What did he say? In his message, Cavill wrote, "Pride is not stupid when it represents years of effort, passion, and respect for fans. If being faithful to Geralt is pride, then I accept it with honor." Boom! I mean, that is like, that's like this right here. Mic drop. That was, it was like, oh yeah, by the way, this is a mic thing that I'm working on. So kind of apropos that this came out. Pride is not stupid when it represents years of effort, passion, and respect for fans. If being faithful to Geralt is pride, I accept it with honor. This answer was applauded by millions of followers, seen as a direct lunge at Hemsworth, who immediately disappeared from public scene without issuing any more comments. Imagine that. Industry analysts point out that this conflict is much more than a clash of egos between two actors. It is a reflection of the tension that exists between streaming platforms, creators, content creators, and public expectation. The Witcher is not simply a series. It is a multi-millionaire franchise that has generated video games, novels, merchandising, conventions dedicated to the universe. Any alteration of the public's perception of this can translate into gigantic losses. Oh, crazy. It just crazy. People say that Henry Cavill not only played Geralt, but embodied it with passion and level of commitment across the screen. His dedication from strenuous training to his deep knowledge of the original material has made it a difficult icon, if not impossible, to replace. Kind of similar to, what Ferrithus was saying is that, Superman, he gets into his work and he goes above and beyond what a lot of actors do. Although Hemsworth has enough talent and fame to sustain the role, his unfortunate phrase could have marked a before and after in the perception of his suitability. In conclusion, what happened in these last hours with this situation, it is an earthquake that exposes the fragility of great productions before the power of fans and the speed at which a phrase can put a whole company in check. Netflix is now in a crossroads, either manages to repair the fracture and recover the public's confidence or risk the collapse of one of its greatest jewels. One thing is safe. In the world of The Witcher, where loyalty and honor are fundamental values, the battle of the heart of fans has begun, and everything indicates that Henry Cavill is still in the minds of millions, the only true Rivia Geralt. And and that, in my opinion, is why I just don't understand why Liam would even say anything like that. I get there was a ton of people saying there's no way he can fill the shoes of Henry and so on and so forth. So I get that can be frustrating. But realize if you want this to work, always take the sides of the fan and the story. I realize I'm not Henry Cavill. I have some big shoes to fill, but I want to be able to continue what's important. And that's the story, so fans can have content and continue on in the universe of The Witcher. That's all he had to say. That's all he had to say. Cut and paste. I'm happy to have the opportunity. I have some big shoes to fill, but it's about the story. It's about the fans. It's about continuing the universe. That's all he had to say. But no, he was like, we're not here to honor his stupid pride. That shows me as you are childish, immature, you don't know which side your bread is buttered, and you're acting like Rachel Zegler, and your mouth is going to get you in trouble. And other studios are going to see this. Other streaming platforms are going to see this and say, just put his picture on the back burner. yeah, we thought we might use him for some stuff. Not so much anymore because he can't learn to keep his mouth shut. He can't say the right things. So, I don't know. Ferrithus says, similar to Pierce Bronson was James Bond. He was really good, so that guy came after him, had a really tough start. And and then there's, go back to the different James Bonds. Some James Bonds, some people say the epitome of James Bond was Sean Connery. Roger Moore, Pierce Brosnan, and then the guy that we have now, which is what's his face, he does a good job on that as well. So is it a generational thing, or is it a story thing, a story and an actor thing, or a generational thing? All those things combined, I don't know. But what I do know is that you don't go on and say that the lead actor who made the series basically what it is today, the first 3 seasons being a huge marketing success, and say that we're not going to honor his stupid pride. It's like, what? Aren't you proud to be an actor that filled the role of certain roles that you played, Liam? You should have pride. You should be honored in the fact that you get to act and do something that you love to do. But it seems like, I don't know, maybe he doesn't even love to be an actor, but he basically shot himself in the foot by making that statement, and that's going to alienate him from a lot of other future projects that people that were like, hey, maybe Liam, we can, if they're on the fence, now they're not. They're going to, we need to find somebody else. Again, kind of like the Rachel Zegler story type of thing there. So, and I know entertainment is highly subjective, and some people will say, well, Henry Cavill is, he wasn't that good, or the new Superman, well, he was good because it was a time period and is filmed in a different genre. I get that. But what makes the most money? What appeals to the largest audience? That's really what it comes down to. And even if the actor is good, it doesn't help the situation as when an actor comes in and badmouths a previous actor, especially when it seems to have no. Now, if Henry Cavill was a jerk and whatever and all of that, and there was evidence of him being very problematic on set or whatever, or not, just being an ass, but even then, with the situation, let's say Henry Cavill was the worst, the series still made a ton of money, and Henry didn't say anything, even if he was a jerk. It still made a ton of money. So he knew what side of the bread was buttered. So he knew, even if he's a jerk off screen, he knows where he's getting paid. And so he was smart enough to keep his mouth shut. Liam, it's like he just shows up the first day on the job, and I think they filmed, and they got the series that's coming out and all this stuff. And then they're doing the promos and the hype for all this. And he just bleeds at the mouth, the diarrhea of the mouth. And it's like, you can imagine Netflix executives see this, hear this, read this, and they're just like, oh my gosh, seriously, why? And you lose $20 million and fans are upset and saying, hey, we're going to cancel our subscription. Apparently a bunch of them. I've been looking at the Reddits and stuff, and man, it's just rough. Ferrithus pops up and says, all right, time for dinner over here. Good day over on the other side of the planet. Again, enjoy your meal. Have some fun. Relax. And good seeing you as always, sir. Maybe I should come on a little bit earlier and do this, but we're hitting like just over an hour, so I think we're good. But maybe I'll stream a little bit earlier. So anyway, enjoy your meal. Have a good one. Appreciate that. And I got to get me some breakfast here pretty soon. But that's what we got going on. Some interesting stuff. So not only do we have, we talked about a number of things, and the super age population, the foreign labor here in Korea, Chinese tourists acting badly, it's getting a bad rap. Cambodia tourism, probably not a good place to go, especially with the problems that Cambodia is having with Thailand, and then Thailand having a bunch of problems with their immigration and retirees and DTVs and all of that stuff. And then we closed this. We talked about some other relationships and population here in Korea and abroad, as we have super aging populations. And then we closed it out with The Witcher and the monumentally stupid Liam Hemsworth in what he said, and kind of tanking the Netflix and alienating millions and millions of fans of the Witcher series, which is, yeah, he definitely put his foot in his mouth on that one. And it's going to be a hard road to recover. Fans of alternate realities and universes and games and movies and whatever it is, once you alienate them, it's very hard to win them back. So, to be honest with you, I'm probably just going to rewatch the first three seasons. So, to fill the void, I'll watch season 4. I don't have Netflix. I mean, I'll be able to watch it. But, yeah, I mean, that just is so off-putting to me. If I now see any other things with Liam Hemsworth, it's like I'm scrolling through Amazon Prime or whatever streaming movie services that we have. We've got some here in Korea. If I see his name, it's actually swipe. It's not going to interest me, because he has some type of personal vendetta rather than focusing on keeping the universe alive and trying to bring good content to fans. That's what it is. The fans are important. Excuse me. When you alienate the fan base, there's going to be a knee-jerk reaction, and unfortunately, the companies that are producing the series are going to lose it. And then I think Liam's going to find himself out of a job. Honestly, I think it's going to get to the point. It depends on how many people end up watching season 4 and the reviews that it gets. But the last time I checked, which was yesterday, on the trailer for season 4, it had 18,000 likes, but it had like 139,000 dislikes. So, yeah. And it was like, well, why is that? I mean, yeah, Liam isn't Henry. I totally get that. I accept that. But now I can see why there were so many dislikes. And even then, the trailer was kind of like, kind of like Geralt from Temu or Wish.com. It just doesn't look good. But we'll see. I'll still watch it. We'll see how it goes. But yeah, just the fact of what Liam said, just kind of is like, yeah, that's not somebody I want to associate with. Somebody who's petty and obviously self-absorbed and not mature and civil. Whereas Henry Cavill, ends up, his response wasn't explosive. Like the article said, what has it said? It ends up, Henry Cavill decided not to remain silent. True to his elegant but forceful style, he published an official statement. Far from turning off the fire, he ended up intensifying it. I don't think he really intensified it. I think he just took the high road, and in his message he said, "Pride is not stupid when it represents years of effort, passion, and respect for fans. If being faithful to Geralt is pride, then I accept it with honor." Classy. That is such a classy answer. The only way he could have made that better is said, hey, it's about the fans and it's about the universe and it's about extending that out and giving a great viewing experience for the fans and continuing the storyline. I don't know. Absolutely crazy. So anyway, that's what we got going on. We're going to finish this up, and I got to get something to eat because I am starving. It's like 9 o'clock right now. And today's gym day, so we got that as well. So we're going to be closing out this video. If you want to contact me, here is the email address. If you just want to say hi, ask questions, send pictures of your dog, family, cats, your 3D prints, your miniatures, whatever it is. I do hobby stuff. Feel free, I answer that. bunch of people over here bought me coffee, link in description box. But the best thing that you could end up doing is liking this video. That would be the best thing that you could do for me. And being as my birthday month, please, I will take a like for my birthday. So with that being said, for all the people, Ferrithus is already gone. We got George, and we had Adam. We got a couple other people, CBGB, and all of that. We got a few. So some other people that didn't leave comments, but appreciate it. Thank you for watching, and be sure to subscribe, and we'll see you on the next video. All right? Peace. I think Helmsworth needs a helmet, because he's going to go through a lot of flack. So yeah, it's he's in deep trouble. Peace.